In this video, we're continuing with our demonstration of Python, Flask, and wtforms. And in this one in particular, we're going to add the sort of simplest beginning of validation, and that's going to be that an input be required. Okay, so this, in addition to this app, which is going to handle the routes, there will be a Python file for the forms. We're going to do render template, so we need HTML. We're going to have an HTML for the form, then another HTML that responds to or handles the form. Those two HTMLs are going to extend a layout, and that layout is going to refer to a simple style sheet. Okay. So I usually run from commands, and I've already done sort of all of these already, except for the Flask run. So you can see the V I am activated and so on. I'm going to do Flask run and show you, and then show you how I got what I got. Okay. So here is the sort of web server. Here is the form, and I don't have to make drop-down list required. There's always some value selected in a drop-down list, but I made the other three have a requirement, an input required. So right now the name has no value to start off with. So if I hit enter, it's sort of yelling at me right away. So let me put, I will get, sort of comes back here and is sort of yelling that something belongs here. What if I blank put in Fred down here, but blank this one out and hit enter? And then I get this prompt. So up here, I didn't have as nice a prompt. It was giving me the prompt, but it was remembering, this browser was remembering some previous entries. And so that's why I wasn't seeing please fill out this field sort of prompt. But if I hadn't sort of this list of previous things I had entered into such a field, then I would have gotten something that looked like that. So I better, how many hours did they work? 20. So if this field is empty, it's sort of yelling at me or prompting me to put something in there one way or the other. If this field has nothing, it yells at me. And if this field has nothing, it yells at me. Otherwise, it will sort of go through. So that's all that's the only new thing that we have. This right now, I'm looking at the Flask, what handles the routes, and I'm not sure there's much of anything new here. Later on, when we do further validations, this line 33 will change. We will go from is submitted to is it valid, but for required, we don't see such a thing. Okay. So there's no real change in the in this route handling Python file, the Flask route part. I did want to show, sorry, up here, view page behind and view the source. And here is the name. And what's now added here in the HTML is this like required attribute down here for the hours, required attribute down here for the wage, required attribute. So that was the addition. And then the browsers all have their way of handling this. So I'm not specifying like, oh, here's the message you should see or anything like that. This is the only addition here. Other validations, we will have error messages and things will change, but this is the simplest, just the field is required. And that is what you see in the HTML, that there's a required attribute. Okay, so no real change here. Here is the form Python, and we are bringing in, you know, importing an input required validation. So from wtforms.validators import input required. So that is new. Here is the string field. We've added a second argument here to validators equal square brackets input required open close parenthesis. This is the validators is equal to a list, and that is going to allow us to, for other validators, to have other types of validations, but also, so it's a list of possible types of validations that the input's required and something else may be required. And also will allow, say, like error messages. So you can have multiple validations on a field, hence a list. Okay. This is the submit button, the drop down select, no validation there. They always give a value. Here's the hours, which was an integer field. This is what put the value of 20 in there in the first place, and this is what labels it as hours. And then here is, again, just the simplest validation that the input is required. Same thing for the wage. Okay, so the form didn't really change. There's nothing over here. Again, because the browser, this simple that the field is required validation is sort of built in and handled by the browser itself. So there is no change here for at this level of validation over here in the form. And then in the handler, I had previously put for the name, I had some Jinja if to say that if there was no result name, just over here on the handler, sort of say, oh, no name was entered or something. But I took that out because I'm not going to get here without there being a name because of the validation. So it won't get here if there is no result name. So I took out that if that I previously had, but I left in the previous stuff and the calculation of the overtime and so on. Okay, this is a short one. That's all I wanted to show you. So I added validation, no real change in the routes. There is some change here in the form, the WT form page or file that we are doing input required, that is the sort of, I don't know, first element, if you will, in the list of validators for the name and for the hours and for the wage. And even if I put something there in the first place, the user can take it out. So I would still like to have an input required. There was no real changes on the form HTML. And there was no real changes in the handler HTML, except I was handling the possible mistake of not having a name in Jinja, and that's not going to happen anymore, so I took it out. So that's all there was. Thanks for your attention.